All right. So welcome everyone. I hope you can hear me well. If not, please use the chat box and let me know. And Ruth, can you share your video as well again? Ah, yeah, there we go. Perfect. All right. So yeah, let's get started. We are presenting today about the Global Leap Awards Offgrid Cold Chain Challenge. You might have heard about it before, or you might have heard about Global Leap because there have been a couple of different challenges. Maybe you've heard about the refrigeration challenge or solar water pumping or solar e-waste. But today we are really focusing on this Offgrid Cold Chain Challenge. And the Offgrid Cold Chain Challenge was run as part of the UK aid-funded Ideas to Impact program, which is managed by an IMC worldwide-led consortium to test innovation prices as a tool to stimulate new solutions to development challenges. And in this specific case, obviously, we are working on, or we are looking at cold chain solutions. And in that way, we will go into that in more detail later, but in that way, it's quite different from a refrigeration cooling solution. It's going to be Ruth Kimani from CLASP and me presenting this webinar. Energy for Impact and CLASP has been contracted by IMC to implement this program, and we have been working on that in the last 1.5 to 2 years, roughly, and have found quite some interesting insights and learnings from that. Firstly, I would like to add some housekeeping rules. So everyone who has been joining now has been joining muted. You are able to unmute yourself, but we would ask you to please not unmute yourself while we are presenting. When we come to the question and answer session, you can either unmute yourself or you can post your question in the question box. So there are two things. There's a chat and there's a question box. So we would really like you to use the Q&A section, because that will really help us to see what questions have been coming in and what we have answered already. For any other things, if you have any problems with the webinar, please post it in the chat box and we can try to respond to it as quickly as possible. All right, then, yeah, let's go to the first slide with an overview of the agenda. All right, perfect, thanks, Ruth. So we will first give a little bit of an overview of where the cold chain market is currently standing, or what some of the very few figures are that we are actually aware of or that we know right now. But it is a very nascent market, so it is quite limited what we know so far, and all the things that we know are based on a few pilot projects. Some companies have been scaling a bit, but there's not like a very large coverage of cold storage solutions in the sub-Saharan African market yet. Ruth will then present on cold chain elements, so what really makes a cold chain a chain, and then goes into more detail of the types of cold chains in off-grid areas. And then she will give an overview of what we have done during this OGCCC competition, and will explain what technologies and business models we have seen and what challenges the competition has faced. And then I will go into more detail about what we have learned from interviews that we have conducted with industry players. So after we have implemented that competition, we have talked to a couple of industry players, partly those that have also been part of the competition, but also others. And we have learned quite some interesting things from that, besides what we have seen through the competition. I will give a short overview of the COVID-19 impact on the sector, and then also go into what other programs and grants are currently existing, and what do we think are the main takeaways and recommendations from what we have learned. All right, so yeah, Ruth, do you want to get started?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Maria, for that introduction. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased this afternoon, and as you've heard, my name is Ruth Kimani. I am an associate at CLASP, and I'll be presenting on behalf of the Efficiency for Access Coalition. So the Efficiency for Access is a global coalition working to promote high-performing appliances that enable access to clean energy for the world's forest population. And so, as Maria has said, so what is the market opportunity for cold chain, and especially when we are looking at sub-Saharan Africa? So a study by the Food and Agriculture Organization, 2015 study, shows that 40 to 50% of the food in sub-Saharan Africa that perishes before it reaches the customer. And a report by the Inspira Farms shows that 30% of these post-harvest losses could actually be saved through cold storage solutions. And a similar report by Power for All estimates that 1.5 million is the number of off-grid farmers that are serviceable with cold storage solutions by 2030. And the market opportunity for 2030 is estimated to be at US billion 1.32. So there's clearly a lot of potential, and it's clearly a large market that that can be unlocked. So when we are looking at the cold chain elements, so cold chain, when we talk about cold chain, we are looking at the managing temperature of perishable foods, and it is from a point of origin through a distribution chain to the final consumer, and with the goal of maintaining the quality and the safety of the food. And so there are various elements that are comprised in the cold chain process, and on the diagram, it basically shows a map of the cold chain that was developed during the scoping stage of this project. And it shows the Kenyan example. So we have the distributors from the producer at the producer's level, a couple of players in the sector that are identified, and then the different elements, transport, processing, warehouse, all of which make up the cold chain. Now, and when we talk about cold storage, what we are talking about is looking at the refrigerated or a cooled space that is designed to keep products at controlled temperatures. And so cold storage are an important part of the whole cold chain systems that contribute directly to addressing food waste problems. However, the challenge comes in that in emerging economies in the global south, you find that there is little to non-existent of cold storage solutions that are allocated at the aggregator or at the farmer level, which is where a lot of food waste happens. And this is because you find due to challenges such as energy access, high energy costs, and the like, you find that the few cold storage solutions that are existing in these markets will mainly be located in areas that are close to the grid and mainly used by large aggregators and farmers targeted for what is considered the profitable export market. And so, and to further, so a research done by the Rockefeller Foundation in 2017 actually found that, looking at the Kenya mango value chain, actually found that of the 60% of post-harvest losses that occur, 45% occur at farmer level, with 5% occurring at the trader level, and at the larger consolidator level, we have very, very minimal waste, if any at all happens. And so therefore, this underlies the need to develop energy efficient and affordable cold storage solutions that can be used in off-grid areas, and that will hold the potential to unlock the food production in the agricultural sector. And this ties into the work done by the Energy for Access Coalition, which is basically a group of partners that came together and believed that energy efficiency can be used as a way or as a catalyst to promote energy access, but they still need for further investment and support to fully unlock this market potential. So what are the types of cold chains that we find in off-grid areas? So I'll just begin by saying that they do exist various cold chains. For example, the vaccine cold chain, but for the purposes of this presentation, we are focusing on the agricultural cold chain. And the thing to note about cold chains is that different cold chains will have different requirements, or different within the same type of cold chain. You'll find that different produce or products will have different storage demands with regards to temperature or humidity requirements, among others. And so, for example, looking at this slide, we have three types of cold chains that have been highlighted. One, the fresh fruits, vegetables, and flowers cold chain. Second, the meat and fish cold chain. And third, the milk, chilling, and storage cold chain. And so, for instance, zooming in on the fresh fruits, vegetables, and flowers cold chain, we are seeing two buckets of vegetables. In one bucket, we are having the pepper, the mango, tomato, and potato, which require a cooling temperature of 13 to 15 degrees Celsius, or a storing temperature of 13 to 15 degrees Celsius. And on the other hand, we have cabbage, onions, and apples, which require storage temperature or cooling requirement of 0 to 2 degrees Celsius. And the same, it's the same across the different cold chains. And so what that means is that it is very important to understand these sort of like nuances when you're designing cold storage solutions, and also when considering what business approach to employ in a given or target market. So the off-grid cold chain challenge, so through the Global Leap Awards, as Maria had earlier mentioned, and in partnership with Energy for Impact, so the off-grid cold chain challenge was launched in March of 2018, and it was a competition to identify the most energy efficient, cost-effective cold storage solutions that can be used, that can meet the requirements for cold chains in off-grid areas. And focus was mainly on walk-in cold storage solutions with a minimum size set at 3 cubic meters. The first stage of the competition required companies to nominate their solutions through written submissions. And in these submissions, they detailed their technical specifications, they detailed potential partners, they also detailed deployment plans and their planned business models. And the second stage of the competition was a field test evaluation to collect the technical and performance data of the cold storage solutions, which needed to be deployed in either of the 9 countries as shown on the slide. And so successfully deployed units were fitted with remote monitoring units to collect temperature, humidity, and energy consumption data. And this quantitative data was supplemented by qualitative data, which was collected in 2 ways. First, through a baseline survey, which was submitted at the time of installation of these units. And second, through phone and weekly interviews, which were done throughout the test period. And this was so as to help us understand the interactions that the users as well as the operators of these cold rooms were having or experiencing. So over 40 nominations were received from the first stage of the competition. And out of these, 28 were pre-qualified to proceed for judging. And the results, and these results can be seen as indicative of the high interest that there is to develop off-grid cold storage solutions. However, it is also important to note that majority of these applicants were really very small startup companies, and which goes to show that there's still a lot of support and investment that is needed for these companies to fully realize their capacities. So analysis of the data that we received during the nomination period found 5 main components across all the solutions that were presented in the competition. And these are: 1, remote monitoring and sensors; secondly, thermal storage; third, solar array; fourth, cooling unit; and fifth, insulation. And we also found innovation, especially around experimenting with the various materials for the various components. And so, for example, we had companies who used phase change material so as to help bolster the autonomy of their systems. We also had cases where companies opted to use clay bricks with recycled plastic bottles for insulation, which, though a less efficient method, you find is more affordable compared to, for instance, the normal use of polyurethane foam. And so what this basically reveals is that there are various choices, or the various strategic considerations that technology providers have to grapple with when designing these solutions, and especially especially looking at 4 main aspects. And so, 1, when you're balancing the quality of the cold unit as well as affordability for the end users. And an instance in the competition, you find that for a lot of these units, looking at the cost of the battery and the cooling units took up a larger share of the total cost of these solutions. And so therefore addressing the cost in these areas has the potential to greatly improve affordability of these kind of solutions. And then secondly, when you're looking at repairability, how easy is it to access spare parts, looking at the level of technical capacity that exists in the target market, as well as its accessibility. And thirdly, when you're looking at the use location context. So for example, for the cold hub solutions, which is mainly installed in open air markets, where it is exposed to all kinds of different weather elements, it would make sense to have perhaps a more expensive but durable sturdier material for the outer part, compared to maybe a solution that would be used in a more protected environment. And fourthly, when you're looking at the business model, so for example, if you're planning or employing or wanting to use a leasing model, for instance, then in this case, you would need to have robust remote monitoring and sensors installed in the core solutions, in your solutions. So cooling as a service is not a new phenomena. It's been there, and it's a business model where a customer pays for the cooling, or pays on the basis of usage of the cooling space, as opposed to having to acquire the unit. And the advantage that this model has is that it allows it removes the burden on the end user to understand the technology, or to afford, or to understand the technology, to afford the technology, or even to maintain this kind of technology. And we saw 2 distinct types of service models implemented throughout the competition. And one of this was under this cooling as a service model, and one was pay as you store, where customers are charged for an allotted space within the cold storage unit, and basically pay on a daily basis or pay based on a tray basis. And the second approach we saw was the leasing model, which was offered to larger farms and farming cooperatives. And in this model, we saw that we had companies that looking at the seasonality of the crop production and things like that. So we would have, they were able to allow or lease the cold storage solutions to a particular farmer group for a particular period of time, and then, then pay based on that period. And the two innovations that we saw around the business models were IoT and maintenance, and secondly was portability. And so figuring out, and so the advantage with IoT advancements is that they play a key role when you're looking especially at preventive maintenance, or when you're looking at the flexibility of experimenting with different business approaches that you're thinking to employ. And so, for example, for a technology provider who's not necessarily based where the solution is used, then advancements in IoTs play a critical role in helping them to manage this kind of units. Secondly, portability, and so as I have mentioned, where we have groups of farmers having multiple growing seasons, so it might make sense to, so where portability is availed, then it makes sense for them to have these cold solutions move portable, so that, aligning with the seasonality, or aligning with the season of the crop that is being harvested. And also when you're looking at regions where we have farmer groups that are more widely spaced, so this then becomes an advantage. And so basically what that means is that it is really important to understand the user needs, the profile, and the use and the context settings of the cold storage solutions when you're designing them, as this will help determine what business approach to use. And because figuring out a working business model is a key stimulant to the growth of the cold storage market. And so the technology and the business market are all interlinked. So we had, so coming off of over 40 nominations, 28 pre-qualified for judging, we had 10 companies shortlisted from the first stage and who proceeded to the second stage. However, out of these 10 companies, we had 6 companies that were able to deploy their solutions in their target markets, but only 4 of these were able to have these solutions in operation within the test period time. And so the 4 finalists, as you can see, we have Cold Herbs, EcoZen Solutions, Freshbox, and EcoLife. So these were the 4 finalists, and granted to say there are a number of challenges that were faced for us to end up here. So I'll briefly share one of the videos from one of the finalists. Sorry, I'll be able to share towards the end. I think we can do that. I'm not able to.
Okay.
Running into some difficulties. Yeah, so I will continue. And so a number of challenges were experienced throughout the competition. And we classified them as looking at the challenges during the deployment phase and after the deployment phase. And so one of the big challenges during the deployment phase was experienced by these companies was the inability to find local partners. And so coming off of, like I mentioned earlier, these are very small startup companies coming into new markets where they do not necessarily have existing linkages or partnerships. And so those are quite big hurdles that they had to face. And so for a lot of them, it was difficult to find partners to partner with in the first place. And then for those that were able to establish some sort of a partnership, due to a number of challenges, they were not able to follow through with operationalizing these partnerships. And part of this was because of looking, first of all, like affordability of some of these cold solution systems, and also looking at the newness of this technology. And so this could have posed a big risk for even the local partners that were willing to partner with some of these companies. And so lack of funding and lack of support to set up local presence. So all of these are tied, looking at a lot of these companies that we had participating really depend on debt or equity to sort of like finance their activities. And R&D basically, which takes up a lot of like resources in this aspect. And so any interruptions in their fundings flow that they experience have very detrimental effects on their operations. And so a number of companies face these challenges and were not able to deploy their units to the target countries. So now casting our eyes to after deployment. So one challenge, so the challenges experienced was one, looking at logistics and transport to the remote areas. So understanding that a lot of these solutions are being deployed to the farmer level, which in most cases is in remote areas, and in most cases there's poor transport infrastructure and the like. And so this builds up to the cost to actually transport these units from the farmer locations. Secondly, in the case of where we are having a lot of these participants who had to sort of import their units, so we had challenges with the import process. And so, for example, we had one participant, Ecozen, whose unit took almost 5 months for it to be cleared through the Kenyan customs. And this was because of very long, arduous processes and unclear importation guidelines, which added to complicate this process, as well as high taxes that were imposed on these companies when importing these products. And so secondly, technical issues was also a major issue. All the units that we had in the field experienced some sort of technical problems which affected the functionality and the use of the cold solutions. And this was compounded by the fact that there was very little local technical capacity that was available to sort of like help address these problems. And so we had in some cases where a lot of these solutions only worked for a very minimal period of time within the test period. So I've mentioned about the importation requirements. So difficulty obtaining local permits. So yeah, a lot of these solutions as well, which are to be installed in public places, face this challenge whereby they had to go through these very long and arduous and elaborate processes set by the local councils and the public councils for them to be able to obtain local permits. And so this added into the challenge and the cost and the time to have these solutions on the ground. And so various ways in which the competition or the project team tried to support these companies was, one, by advancing cash price to companies to help cover deployment costs. So for all companies that were shortlisted from the first round, from the first stage, they all received an advanced cash payment to help them cover this deployment cost. The project also tried to extend the timeline from the originally planned 6 months test period to reducing that to 8 months test period, so as to allow companies more time to solidify and the partnerships, as well as to navigate through the importation barriers that they were facing. The project team was also involved in supporting in the negotiations, as well as providing the necessary documentation that the different authorities were asking for, especially the Customs Authority, and also based on the monitoring and the data that we were receiving from the installed remote monitoring units, we were able to provide feedback to companies, which allowed them to address some of the technical issues that they were not aware of. So this slide just goes to emphasize a bit on the technical challenges that were experienced through the competition. And so we have two charts which shows the performance results, and that is looking at the daily average internal temperature and the ambient temperature over the test period. So we have two units, Unit A and Unit B, and as you can see from the charts, Unit A had a fairly good performance, and the unit was able to maintain relatively stable temperatures that were under 6 degrees Celsius within the test period. Whereas if you compare that with Unit B, which struggled with maintaining temperatures and only worked for a very short window to maintain the 10 degrees Celsius. And so this just goes to sort of like, emphasize and underline that there's still a lot of support that is needed to grow the technical capacity as well as the business capacity for the actors and the players in the off-grid cold chain storage sector.
All right, thanks a lot, Ruth, for the presentation. And yeah, with this video, I think actually we are already like at 4:40, so only 20 minutes left. So I think you can just we will share the presentation and you guys can just take a look at the videos yourself, and there are also some articles on that. So let me try to get through the rest in 10 minutes or so, and then we will take another 10 minutes for questions. So please post any questions in the Q&A box, when you have any coming up. All right, so let me talk about the wider challenges in the sector. As I mentioned, we have done a couple of interviews, and besides what we learned during this competition, we have gained some more market insights about whether other players in the market see similar issues or other things. And the main things that came out that are really related to what we have seen in the competition as well is firstly, a challenge is that there really needs to be a clear value proposition for the end customer. So as long as the cost of spoiled food plus the cost of creating the product, things like labor, fertilizer, pesticides, are less than the cost of the refrigeration, it doesn't make economic sense for farmers. So it really needs to be a product where we can expect a higher price, or where we can expect enough food or enough reduction of food losses that the farmers would have enough income to actually justify the price of the unit. And there again, we go into the whole business model point as well, where, obviously if customers are paying on a cooling as a service basis, so they just pay per day or per hour even, that might make much more economic sense for them. Secondly, there needs to be a business model fit. And we have also talked about some business models before. And both of the broader business models, one, the traditional sales model, and on the other hand side, the kind of service model, have their issues. Obviously, with the traditional sales model, we have an affordability issue because small farmers would not be able to afford it. It doesn't make economic sense for them because they don't actually have enough produce to store in this huge cold storage unit. And then secondly, for the service-based model, we might have a problem with kind of like tragedies of the common issue where a collectively managed cold storage unit where everyone is basically trying to maximize their own interest might not be easy to maintain, or it might be difficult to decide if there might be too much demand to store units, like who's going to get what kind of like shelf part and these kind of things. So that could be also potentially difficult, but we have seen that the service model might be the better fit in cases where we're dealing with smaller farmers. Consumer education of technology and post-harvest best practices. We heard a lot about of feedback on things like, and we have seen that also with the companies that we worked with under the OGCC competition, for example, customers not understanding that they cannot leave the door open because that will make the cold air disappear and requires much more energy. So these kind of things really need to be taught, or there needs to be a person that kind of maintains that and really controls it in wherever the cold storage unit is deployed. And for example, one of the companies we talked with had a very interesting approach. They created an app that farmers could use, and where they would also, for example, get information about at what temperature they should store which kind of produce. So they could, for example, look up, I have tomatoes, at what temperature should I store these tomatoes? And obviously then that would have to be coordinated between the farmers who want to store in this cold storage unit. We also learned that what's especially harmful are temperature fluctuations. So it's really important to get the harvested products into these cold storage units as quickly as possible within a few hours of actually harvesting them. And there needs to be some kind of like temperature control unit available. And we need to also think about, what happens afterwards. Where will the vegetables or other kind of produce go, and how's the temperature fluctuation in that part of the chain. With regards to partnership, I think Ruth mentioned it already. It's really important to find trustworthy local partners, and that hasn't been very easy. And with partners, we mean really local distributors on the ground or technical partners that can do maintenance and these kind of things. And what we have also heard from a couple of cold storage providers is that they would be interested in partnerships with mini-grid developers, but they are not yet really sure how that would work because they are worried about that the business model might not fit well together, or that site selection criteria for mini-grid developers versus cold storage solution providers might be different in a way. So I think more discussions need to happen there and needs to be tested out how that could fit well together. On the local technical expertise, I've mentioned it already a little bit. There's a lack of local technicians in refrigeration services, and that's why it's really important to either either partner with a local company if available, or potentially train more local companies to be able to do that, or have an own technician on the ground who could repair the unit if necessary. And obviously it's equally important to have the remote monitoring devices so that technical issues can be recorded remotely as well. On the quality versus price versus use context issue, we would want to raise that we are seeing a couple of providers really providing very high quality cold storage units that are operating on EU standards because there is a lack of local standards. But we believe that there really needs to be a trade-off between the quality of the unit and the price attached to it. Obviously, it should be good quality, it should be working, but it also needs to still be affordable. If these EU standards mean that the cold storage unit will be much more pricey, it might be less applicable to the sub-Saharan African market. And finally, it is, we have seen challenges with education of governments and investors. So we see a lot of hurdles on the government side because there's a lack of awareness. And I think the sector has seen that in other areas before, like solar home systems a couple of years ago that were less understood. Now the business model is pretty well understood by investors as well as governments. So there's been a lot of support and more detailed policies around that. And I think that's where the cold storage unit market has to go as well over time. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right. Learnings and feedback from the sector. We do think that there are 4 main areas that we need to focus on. Firstly, on the partnerships to really help companies to identify the right partnerships and provide these kind of market linkages. And then also organize potential conferences or other events where players can meet up and foster these relationships. That's currently obviously difficult with COVID-19, but hopefully in the future that will be possible again, and digital options might be available as well. We do think there needs to be a lot done on advocacy and government related components. Oh, I'm just being told my internet connection is unstable. Please let me know if you can't hear me well. Oh yeah, maybe Ruth, can you please go to the next slide? Yes, thank you. Perfect. All right, so here on advocacy and government, we have covered it already. Mostly, we need certain policy standards for chilling in emerging markets. For example, potentially subsidies or rewards for specific high quality cooled produce, so that these produce could also be more viable in the local market and not just for an international export market where sorry, off-takers are actually willing to pay more. On the technical business model side, we believe, and Ruth has very quickly mentioned it already, that we need more mobile cold storage solutions that can really bring the cold storage to the farmer, pick up the produce, and really ensure that the produce is held pretty consistently on a low temperature level, so that we are avoiding temperature fluctuations and that we are able to bring the produce from the farmer to the market in a way that is already cooled, and then further from the local market to maybe a larger hub where it can then be shipped or offload to other places. We also need to support companies in higher risk countries, which, for example, was our exclusion criteria for this competition, sadly. But we have heard interest for markets such as like DRC, etc. And I think we should provide more support there. There's definitely feedback from the sector that it makes sense to focus on higher value crops, as mentioned before, and those that are exported. We have also heard from a lot of providers that it really helps to aggregate customers and by that balance out seasonal variations. So either it could be achieved through aggregating customers in one location where farmers are arriving that have different kind of produce with different seasonal harvesting times, or it could be achieved by placing these cold storage solutions in different locations. So every few months, the cold storage solution could move from one to another location in the same county, for example, or in the same country where, for example, for a few months, it could support the avocado harvest in one area. Another time of the year, it would support the mango season. And then finally, financing. We have been getting the feedback that there's definitely a much higher need for grants for longer term pilot projects. And because we really still need to understand, or are still on that stage where we really need to understand what fails and why, and what is able to scale sustainably. All right, next slide, please. I want to go on in a bit more detail about the COVID-19 impact on cold storage solutions in Sub-Saharan Africa. So the feedback that we have gotten is that there is increased cold storage usability cases, and that could be For example, in the case of vaccines, even though vaccines normally look at smaller scale refrigerators, not like large scale walk-in cold storage solutions. And in one case, which is a bit macabre, but we heard that cold rooms have also been used as mortuaries. And in general, we do see a higher demand for cold storage because produce cannot be exported as quickly and hence needs to be kept fresh for longer. However, the problem we have seen in some places is that due to restrictions of movement between counties or market closures, it is really difficult for the farmers to actually arrive at where the cold storage unit is placed. And most farmers would not be able to do that, or just within longer, just delayed and therefore have higher food losses again. And there's also obviously been problems with some farmers due to less income being able to afford less cold storage solutions. We have seen supply disruptions due to disruptions in the ability to produce new units and then also get them from wherever they are produced to other countries. And we have seen quite a redirection of funds and grants to COVID-19 relief and things like, for example, vaccine refrigeration, and in general health clinics, and yeah, there's less focus right now on agricultural cold storage, even though we believe there should still be a strong focus on that. And then finally, the problem is really that it's very difficult to give advice in a standardized way because countries are dealing with COVID-19 so differently. And we see, for example, that Nigeria and Uganda, their companies have been really struggling because the countries have had a very strict lockdown, whereas in Kenya it has been a little bit more relaxed and food supply was still flowing quite well, at least in the country. All right, let's go to the next slide. We are giving here an overview of a few cold chain programs and funding opportunities. And I'm not going to go into detail for all of them because we are kind of like short of time and we have a lot of questions actually. So I'm just gonna quickly say there are quite a few programs and also funding opportunities out there. But not all of them are, for example, focused on larger scale agricultural cold storage unit, only a few. Some of them are more focused on refrigeration and air conditioning usage. So we still kind of like need a little bit more focus on the agricultural cold storage solutions. And we think, the organizations that are active in that area can do more, but are already also working on like disseminating research and also supporting pilot programs in that area. For example, with the I think it's on the next slide. We have the cooling as a service initiative that specifically tests out whether cooling as a service works and in what kind of ways. But yeah, I'm not going to go into too much detail of them. You can take a look at them later on. So let's jump to the key takeaways and recommendations. So really our key takeaways here, and they're kind of similar obviously to the learnings I was presenting before, is we really encourage favorably designed financial products that can increase access to appropriate funding needed to undertake R&D activities, invest in relevant human capital, and operate businesses. And we would consider instruments such as patient capital, de-risking through first loss facilities, and results-based financing mechanisms. Secondly, we really need to build the technical as well as the business capacity. So it was interesting that from the sector we heard more of, the technical part is kind of proven already, so we should more focus on the business model. And we do believe that is very important, obviously, to focus on, but we have seen that definitely also the technical part is not yet always proven in those local conditions. So it might be proven in a more general, like, it works from a physics kind of perspective kind of way, but like whether it really works under the local weather and market conditions, and also like taking into consideration human error and these kind of things is not always the case. And then like, for example, with like storage backup, like how much storage backup do we really need, right? We have seen quite a bit of testing still going on there with the cold storage providers that we have been working with. Investments towards enabling technology. So for us, it was really important that we had remote monitoring units. And we believe, especially during this time with COVID-19 and restricted movements, it is very important that companies of that provide cold storage solutions to have some kind of like ability to remotely control that. So we do believe there should be more investments into these kind of things, digital monitoring platforms, equipment, etc. We think there can be more done and more support with regards to in-depth market analysis. Companies don't often have the capacity to do that, and we do think more research on that side and more studies being published would be helpful. So we would definitely encourage that. I've mentioned partnerships that are important to really realize the full potential of such last mile solutions, and build cooperation within and along the food supply chain across different actors, both in the public and private sector. And we really encourage partnerships that enable comprehensive solutions, linking farmers to also market demand and off-takers, so that there's really a clear value add and a clear off-take agreements, so that farmers are pretty sure that they can earn a certain amount more. There have also even been models where I think cold storage providers have charged their customers based on the additional value that they get for their produce directly. So they would basically get a commission of that. And if they don't get more, then yeah, they wouldn't get a commission either. So it's really encouraging that. We believe there needs to be done more with regards to advocacy for business enabling policy frameworks among governments specifically. So that's an important point. And then obviously consumer awareness creation. We really need to build confidence among consumers to invest in this otherwise quite unfamiliar new technology, and to make clear why there's this value add. All right, and finally, we think, our competition was quite useful in doing some field testing, but we do think that there needs to be longer term field testing opportunities as well. And in our competition, we weren't able to do that, unfortunately, much longer term, but we do think there should be future competitions that look at that in more detail. All right, so let's jump to the Q&A section, because we have actually received a lot of questions. So we don't have a lot of time, but we are also recording this. So if you're not able to stay until the end, that's fine, and you can just listen to it afterwards. So let's maybe start with the first question. What kind of continued support will you offer the award-winning solutions post-challenge, especially in the marketing and scaling of impacts? Ruth, do you want to start answering this, or should I go?
Yes, I'm happy to answer, but you can add on.
Sure.
So we are still continuing. So we have shared in previous slide, we had sort of like video storing, short videos for all of these finalists, showcasing their solutions, and these have been posted in our website, and we continue to share this and refer these links to our larger partnership and network of people that we engage with. And so this is still ongoing, and we still continue to pass on opportunities, like information that we've just Maria has just shared, like any upcoming R&D opportunities or grant opportunities, or even opportunities more towards the technical support. So we continue forwarding this kind of opportunities to the finalists.
And yeah, and maybe from my side, so firstly, these finalists received some money prizes. So that kind of supports their ongoing operations in some kind of way, but they can use that in the way they want to. And then secondly, yeah, this has been a pricing competition. So it was really about you know, based on certain criteria, technical criteria, and also qualitative criteria. We talked to the users in terms of satisfaction and these kind of things. We decided who's going to win the competition. But there's obviously much more to be done with regards to support. This cannot be done under that specific program because the specific program has ended. But we are definitely looking to, you know, create potentially a follow-up program in some kind of way. It's not yet sure how that would exactly look like, but we would want to, you know, provide more support to the sector in some kind of way. So we are trying to talk, or we are talking to a few donors with that regard, and have a few other programs where we think we could do more. But that's also why we are, presenting this. We are showing players in the market that, might be donors or that might be interested in future programs, what we found and what still needs to be done. And we really encourage, if you have any ideas or interests or whatever it is, to reach out to us. We will share contact details later. All right. We have been asked whether, Ari Reeves asked whether local partners are actual customers. So maybe let me quickly answer this. We thought about local partners really as like companies locally that are able to maintain the cold storage unit or provide some other kind of like services, like farmers cooperatives that work with the farmers and do training for them. So the cold storage unit provider wouldn't have to do that, or it could also be the local government. So we are less thinking about customers as local partners. Ruth, do you want to quickly answer this question? Which countries were easier to work with on customs and permitting, and which were hard?
So based on the experiences from the challenge, Kenya was very difficult. Was one of the countries where we faced a lot of difficulties with the customs process. And I think compared to Nigeria, I guess they did still encounter some sort of like custom issues, but not as, they did not encounter such a difficult process compared to the Kenya example.
Yeah, I think we also heard about Nigeria having some, I mean, we didn't really have particular issues in our competition, but we heard from some companies there that a process can take quite long in terms of getting permits to actually put their cold storage unit in a market. And then the conditions were actually pretty bad in terms of, it was basically a swamp, and they had to like put much more investment in to actually, you know, be able to properly build the unit there. So there are definitely issues in other markets as well, but it does vary a little bit. We have a lot more questions now, but we are kind of a little bit over time already. So I think what we will do is basically we will save those questions or you know, put these questions together and then answer them afterwards as good as we can, and we'll then send over a document together with the recordings of this webinar and the presentation. So you can see the answers to your questions and then also go through the presentation again. And yeah, here we have put our contact details and the project team members. You can reach out to Ruth or me or both of us if you have any comments, questions, and yeah, we are happy to discuss further. All right, then yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks all for the active attendance as well, and lots of questions. It's really good to see so many points coming in. And yeah, I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thanks so much.